We've gone through all four of the things that we wanted to let go. We've explored some of these themes together. Again, my name is Sadhvi Aparna, and now we're starting to come through with all of those themes that we've been picking up. So let's see what we still are experiencing today. What's our main goal today? So, Chair, can you bring that up? All right. So we've, in the idea of themes that we're picking up, things that we're beginning to introduce into our life more and more, and we'll kind of contemplate some of those together today, and also maybe share where you're coming from. So we've been exploring the value of Sat, Sangha, and Guru. We've been understanding how we can pick up this idea of cultivating detachment or intentional disidentification with worldly matters and with the impermanent. And that is the value of Vairagyam. And that's going to come again and again throughout this text and on our journey to self. So today we're going to be exploring seeking ultimate truth, or Tattva Jnanam. And we will be paying attention to verses 8, 17, 20, 22, 23, 26, 27, and 30. This sounds like a big list, but many of these we've already really gone into in more depth earlier, but we're going to be looking at it through this lens of how these individual verses can help us to pick up this practice and this journey of seeking ultimate truth or knowledge of self. All right, so before we begin on individual verses, let's do a quick check-in in the chat of how many of you were able to observe in the last 3 weeks an increasing ability to cultivate some more detachment to your everyday circumstances. Has anybody noticed that ability beginning to grow and beginning to become more of your everyday life? Are you able to find a little bit more, we'll say detachment, but also a little bit more freedom from all of the things that maybe our mind or our ego or our habituation or our society even asks us to attach to, right? So this is that cultivating vairagyam. And you can clarify if you'd like to clarify. I see a few yeses in the chats. Yes, yes, and space from grasping is growing. So it's our sort of our default trained experience in this reality or this samsara that we'll talk about today to be holding on and grasping on of fear. And what's the fear of? The fear that things will change, the fear that things will end. And what this whole text is telling us is, well, why are you afraid of that? That's definitely happening. Everything is ending. Why have fear? Because it's all coming to an end. Everything here is changing. So our desire to hold on to the impermanent is what's keeping us locked and afraid and separate. And our ability to let that go is opening us up to finding out what is real, which is not what we see around us. It is Govindam. So a few more shares in the chat. Lots of yeses. And one share, I've noticed a growing ability to detach from situations that would have stressed me out in the past. I find that there's a space between the anxious thought and habit and then peacefulness. Yeah, so so much of our the journey to self isn't a walked path in the sense of you're always here. The self is always present. But the journey to pulling off those layers that occlude our vision of self, that can be a practice. That's a journey. That part is the journey. If we immediately were able to know the self, which is that ultimate knowledge, if we were able to do that, it wouldn't be a journey, but to get through our ego is to get through our fears, is to get through this habituation and this training from lifetime to lifetime. So yeah, creating more space, opening those cracks up, right? The Moha Mudgara, this Bhaja Govindam, is hammering away at the outer hard, dense shell of our ego and our mind that we carry from lifetime to lifetime. And so the more we have this practice of both and, the more we allow a little bit more space in between those cracks, and then we open up and open up. And we have some new people today joining us. And while while I haven't been in these sessions, I've been studying with Shunyaji, Acharya Shunyaji, and I've been feeling this for sure. Yeah, so this knowledge of the truth of the self will open. It will open you and it will cultivate. This is the promise of a practice of Vairagyam, is that it does create more and more space. And the more that we discern, the more that we naturally start to feel some of that detachment. All right. And then a few more shares off and on, generally more detachment coming up. Um, and then a share that they've experienced strongly the attachment and then they're trying to detach. So in this experience that this student is having, that sometimes the discernment comes because we can experience that attachment. We become aware. These teachings are creating that awareness. And and we're going to talk about that, especially with verse 17 of like, actually verse 8, where we're just going to start to, this is about waking up, but you have to be aware of where you're asleep and where you're closed off. And so you may feel, as Deborah does, that more strongly, feeling these attachments more strongly, and that is the awareness. Because, that is your awareness. You feel it because you become aware of it. And that's key. That's a key step that many of us maybe don't recognize is happening, but it is that discomfort because we're aware of it that starts propelling that path. If we're completely blind to it, we don't know. If we don't feel those attachments, we don't know they're there. So that's a brave share and a really accurate part of this practice. Yes. And another final share. Yes, when I catch my mind going south, I'll start questioning these thoughts. Yeah, if we catch our mind, you know, uh, it's hard not to put things in terms of even in terms of relationship to directions on this plane. We think we put ourselves so bound. But yes, if we kind of going down into tamas, going down into our lower consciousness, or going up into sattva, and we are all present. But I like that. I appreciate that orientation that the mind is always doing. We're always orienting ourselves. So yes, as we turn from one path to another, that's another way of orienting ourselves. So we're always orienting towards Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Wonderful. So let's talk about what is the ultimate truth. We don't have to share anything right now, but and so let's talk about what is the ultimate truth. So Jnanam is the Sanskrit word for knowledge, and Tattva Jnanam means the ultimate truth or the ultimate knowledge. And what is that knowledge? It's the knowledge of Atman Brahman. So it's then also the knowledge that everything we perceive around us is mithya or conditional reality. It's samsara, which we've talked about a lot in Bhaja Govindam. And what does that mean? It means that everything around us ages, alters, it changes, it decays. It's infirm and it's dependent upon external circumstances. So this is true from our bodies to our relationships, to our achievements, to our material possessions. All of these things are impermanent, right? And this is why Bhaja Govindam, this is why we were asked to let these things go. Let go of our firm grasp of those just a little bit. Because we keep seeking happiness in those impermanent experiences, but we will never find satisfaction. This was this the ability to never find satisfaction is that unquenchable thirst or trishna. And we talked about that in the very beginning, like that nothing is ever going to be ultimately fulfilling when it ends, when it's impermanent, when it changes, because you can't hold on to it. It's never going to it's never going to last. So the ultimate knowledge, that Tattva Jnanam, is also that there is, however, an unconditional reality. There is something that never changes, that it is permanent and is eternal. It's blemishless, it's infinite. And what is that? It's consciousness. And this is Atma. This is Brahman. This is Govinda. Um, so this consciousness describes, it's describing our inner witness self, right? And that's the Atman. And that same consciousness, when it's universally described, is Brahman, or here is Govindam. And this is the source of infinite bliss and pure happiness and awareness, or Satchitananda. So these phrases, all these Sanskrit words I'm sharing with you are ones that I'm sharing because you'll hear them again and again, and we've talked about them again and again. So um, if you understand the concepts, that's the most important part. But I want you all to have that familiarity because they will come up again and again, and you've been studying and sitting with these, and this knowledge is, this knowledge is yours now. And these words, these simple words describe infinite. So we are asked then for this ultimate knowledge to pick up this pursuit of Tattva Jnanam. This thing we're picking up as we're trying to seek this ultimate truth and make that practice something that we do carry on, right? We've let go of all these things. What are we carrying on? So we want to cease our constant pursuit of the impermanent, and we want to seek instead this ultimate truth, right? Turn towards the source instead of the illusion. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, right? So importantly, I think right now is to orient ourselves, as we are mentioning orienting. Bhaja Govindam is a text that clarifies our goals and then the means to achieve that goal. It's not the goal itself. So just reading the book, just hearing it isn't necessarily going to give you mukti, which we'll discuss in the next class, but it is giving you, and what's mukti is that complete clarity and integration of that ultimate truth. How we experience this is as mukti. So it's described here, that mukti is described here, but it's something that is achievable not through an intellectual understanding of the ultimate truth, but through a complete knowing and feeling and witnessing and living of that truth. And so we understand that this text is giving us the tools. It's describing the pitfalls. It's helping us to understand where we are finding ourselves lost. It's giving us directions. Let it go. Don't focus on what's not important. And it's giving us the guidelines and the tools of like where we might find that truth, where we might find it, and where we should go seeking. So don't go seeking in this direction, go seeking in that direction. So how do we do that? We use Viveka, or right discernment, to choose between what is impermanent and permanent, real and unreal, dharmic and adharmic, and then what's setting us on a path of prayas. That's that path of the world, that path of getting lost in our attachments, or on the path of Shreyas, and that's going towards Govindam, going towards the ultimate truth. Yeah. And then whether we're on whether we're practicing boga or yoga, are we even, and we'll see today in some of these verses, we can be, we can be, we can have outward practices that look very pious and um, very sanctified, very religious, very right, and yet without that knowledge, that ultimate knowledge, without that intentionality that we're seeking that knowledge of the ultimate truth. Even these things can be they can be boga, right? They can be done for the ego, they can be done for the mind, they can be done for all the reasons that are not actually getting us closer. So we're really asked to look closely at are we in in these actions that we're taking, are we seeking ultimate truth, or are we seeking just to satisfy our illusions and to grasp onto a temporary happiness, or to avoid that fear that comes up when we think oh no, I'm on the shifting sands of samsara. I'm stuck in this ocean. What am I grasping onto? Again and again, we're told, don't grasp onto the world. Grasp onto satsang. We talked in the last class. Grasp onto guru. Grasp onto truth. Um, yeah. So we want to arrive at our destination. And what is that destination? Is when we know Govindam. And it's to reveal Govindam, to be in union with that. And then this is mukti. So today we're going to pick this theme up together, and then we will all be continuing to pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, of seeking the ultimate truth. So let's see. I see a bunch of shares. Let's see what's happening in the chats before we go on to our first verse. Yeah. Jayanti shares that she had an aha moment recently when Acharya Shunya talked about detachment versus decoloring. In times I thought I was detached because it's easy to say I'm detached, but a different thing to actually feel that calm, decolored state. So what she's speaking of in terms of this is the word raga, and raga is it's raga is coloring, and it's also and so when we say that we are vairagya, we are without, to be detached is to be without that coloration, and the coloration of the coloration of this world, the coloration of our desires and our really strong emotions to things, which comes up when someone takes away what we were attached to, right? And what blooms, what colors bloom? We even use terms like green with envy, red with anger. Feeling gray. It's funny how we use these terms of coloration to describe this very thing that they described thousands of years ago, in the same way of that our attachments, and our emotions that get pulled from one direction to another because we're attached to the impermanent, that these things are causing us constant dukkha, constant sorrow. We think that we're getting some temporary pleasurable happiness, and what we ultimately get is unhappiness. And so if you notice yourself with these, significant emotional responses to things, it's a great impact to say, oh, I didn't know I was attached, but now that I'm having an emotional response, I can see that there is an attachment there. Now that I know that this is really bugging me, then I can look to understand what is my attachment in this situation. These are practical, like real life ways in which we support our seeking with action. We can start, what does it mean to cultivate detachment? Start seeing where you're attached. Right? That's the best way to see. If you want to cultivate detachment, see where you are attached, because that's the big question. Where are we attached? Oh, only you can tell. Only you know, and you know through your response to the world, through your unchecked, unexamined response to the world, right? Yeah. And the same student shares, it can be so subtle too. I'm finding the need to pay closer and closer attention to my mind state. It's illuminating, to say the least. Yes. And that subtle journey is the thing of, this is why in Bhaja Govindam, they keep pointing to some of the leaders in the society. Some of the, like the monks that look, they're wearing the clothes, they look as though they're covered in the ash, they're wearing rags, and yet their passions are still, they're still like holding on to this thing. So even though they look the part, they're not. And I think that is helpful for students like me, like you, like all of us that are sort of on this, on this path to union, is to be aware, as Jayanti shared, that it can get subtler and subtler. By now, probably we're not doing many of the things that are really obvious. We're not obviously attached to a lot of things that maybe our surroundings are attached, our society is attached to. But pay attention to the subtler and subtler places where we're still holding on. Yeah. All right. Deborah, would you like to share?
This is always so timely. Um, I recently, in the last, just a few days ago, I had my car stolen, and it really threw me for a loop. And talk about attachment to this thing, and not only to the thing, but the things that were inside of the thing. I mean, it was almost like layers of attachment. And it was just interesting for me because I was thinking of the car as, we get in our car and it takes us in all these different directions. And so it really threw me into contemplation about, what is my direction? I've lost my direction. Where am I going? What am I focusing on? What is my intention? And just this morning, when a relative lent me a car, um, all the way home, I was just doing Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam over and over again. And it's just, it's interesting because this attachment for me, and it's about loss. And I have this deep heartache in trying to understand about, okay, what is the purpose here? What am I to focus on? And so it's really bringing this home, to focus inside and not outside. But there's a really strong, strong attachment there that I'm really, really working on this, really working on this.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Deborah. Um, there's a there's a there's a great turn of phrase from the modern philosopher, boxer Mike Tyson, American boxer Mike Tyson, where it says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I myself have been exploring this in the context of the Bhaja Govindam teachings, which is this exact thing that Deborah's describing. Is sometimes these experiences that we have in samsara are really big. They have a huge impact, right? There are actions that need to be taken. There are impacts that happen that make us not only uncomfortable but throw off our path. They often, it can come as quite a shock, right? I thought I didn't have attachments until all of a sudden this thing I was depending on. And so we'll see, and I want to get into some of the verses, but we'll see in these verses that we are not, we're not engaging in this world, even in mukti. As long as we have a body, we do take action. We must take action. This is a place of action. This is again and again, Krishna talks about, reveals, illuminates in Bhagavad Gita is the way through it is not to be, you have, it can happen even to a wonderful, sincere seeker of the self that their car gets stolen and their things are removed and that this engenders like discomfort and still you still have to act in the world and we can always use these as reflections of the point isn't that we don't get a car or that we don't manage the situation or that we don't address it, but can we do it? And this is the part that Deborah's working on right now. So clearly is can we do it with, again, can we manage that situation not by ignoring those feelings, not by not looking at where that those colors are coming up, but by acknowledging them and feeling them and then letting them go just a little bit so that we don't become so identified and so attached to that experience, those feelings, that loss, that we become either paralyzed or turned from our right path. Okay, so it's like you still have to, we're all still stuck having to file insurance reports and doing all the things and being a and scrambling to make our material existence functional. And yet, can we do that not by repressing our feelings, but by acknowledging that, there's something here that I can see, and will it turn me from my path? Am I going to choose to stay in this experience or am I going to pick up, pick up these Sat and Sangha and Guru and pick up this Vairagyam and pick up this seeking ultimate truth? We hold in one hand openly and we keep going. So Deborah's shown up to class today. She's right here. She said, what direction am I going in? Wait, I know I can come to satsang. I know I can be present in this. And it doesn't mean that the car isn't stolen. It doesn't mean that she didn't feel some way about it. It means that she's not so closely identifying with that loss that she becomes lost in the loss. All right. Thank you for that share, Deborah. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. Let's get into the meat of this. How are we going to cultivate and how are we going to make a practice of seeking ultimate truth again and again? All right. Let's look at verse 8. We went into this verse before in pretty good depth. Who is your wife? Who is your son? Strange is this samsara, the world. Of whom are you? From where have you come? Brother, ponder over these truths. So when we look to this verse earlier, we were looking to it in the context of relationship and how we identify ourselves in relationships. So, and how we can begin to let go of that tight hold on identifying ourselves with our relationships and our roles. But here in this context, let's look at the second part of that verse. What kind of a weird place are we living in? Right? That we find ourselves grabbing onto that quicksand around us, constantly flitting from one calamity to another, one collapsing belief to another. It's strange, right? This is weird, right? So this is the start of our seeking, right? Waking up to the dream. Yeah. Waking up to this dream and recognizing that our mind is caught up in this strange dream at all, right? We can't actually, every one of us has had the experience of our bodies being asleep, having a dream, having a fantastically crazy dream, and then wait a minute, this is weird, right? There's some moment in that dream. Has everyone had that? Yes, I see a lot of nodding heads. Yeah, where you're no longer in that moment, you're no longer really in the dream. Your body might be asleep, but you've gone from like completely in the illusion world to something different, right? You're just waking up to it. And so even acknowledging that this is a strange samsara, this is a strange world indeed, that we're caught up in this dream. We can spend our whole lives, or 100 lives, or 100,000 lives, just going from flower to flower, calamity to calamity, dream to dream. Um, we can identify ourselves as someone's husband or wife, their parent or their child over and over and over. And most of humanity is doing that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So until we start to look at the dream around us, and then we see that what we thought was going to give us happiness doesn't, and what we ran away from revealed something else. It- Samsara is like this, like a like a like a funhouse mirror filled room, right? And until we remember that it's a funhouse mirror filled room, it's terrifying, right? Or we get lost in the reflection, like, oh, how beautiful. La, 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 la. It's like, wait, first, wake up, start to pay attention. This is weird. This is a weird setup. And this verse teaches us that. And then where have we come from and as waking up completely from the dream, which is mukti, that's that moksha. It requires continually seeing what is not that and then searching for what is. So this is the final thing where it says this injunction to ponder. Um, what are we pondering? This is such a critical part of this journey of understanding. It's not enough to be told this ultimate truth, right? We've been told. It's not enough to be told, but we have to know it for ourselves. So what's going to work here to wake us up, as we've already talked about some shares, is turning our attention back again and again to that awareness that first disturbed our dreams. So keep questioning and contemplating, and don't fall back asleep into the comfortable illusion. Right. So this is a different understanding of that verse, but you see how there's so many multitudes that you can take from any one of these verses. Yeah. Um, yeah, we have some shares acknowledging, yes, that once you start to be aware of that funhouse mirror aspect, how strange. Yeah, and there's a share, how strange when things suddenly appear larger than they really are because of the state of our mind. Yeah, yeah, this is very much that scenario of what we place import and impact upon in this world. But if we only knew, wait a minute, I can just turn around and there's the door. This is what we're looking for. The turnaround and where's the door? All right. All right. So let's go into verse 17. All right. One may go to Ganga Sagar, observe fasts, and give away riches and charity. Yet devoid of jnana, nothing can give mukti, even at the end of 100 births. So you can go to the Ganga River. You can, which is said that if you bathe in the Ganga at least once, all your sins will be removed. Um, you can observe fasts, and these fasts that are observed within spiritual context are to help to purify the mind. And you can observe all the fasts. You can give away all your riches in charity, right? That's said that we can achieve what's called punyam, or positive karmic merit, from giving away our money, and that will buy us positive merit. But devoid of this ultimate knowledge of the self, nothing is going to none of those actions will give us freedom. None of those actions will give us enlightenment. Even if we did it for 100 births, it would help with your accumulated or prarabdha karma. It would help with that experience of your experience will be improved likely lifetime to lifetime, but it won't free you from the funhouse mirror. It won't free you from the delusion. Yeah. And so broadly, this means you can observe all the pieties and austerities. You can have all of the ceremonial trappings that you want, but you cannot buy your way into enlightenment, which is a fun thing when you look at some of the religious connotations of if I give more, if I, so many organized religions have these sort of short circuits, right? Like, oh, I can buy my way through. And this says it's not going to work. You can have all these that you want, but you cannot buy it. Only the knowledge of the ultimate truth of Brahman, and that means the bhakti or the devotion to Govindam, that work of allowing the self to be revealed by the chipping away of that which is not the self, that Moha Mudgara, only that's going to give mukti. And that word mukti here it means, it's freedom, and it comes from the word moksha, or which is made of two Sanskrit words. And we're hitting you up with some Sanskrit today. Kshaya, which means the absolute destruction of, and moha, illusion. So, what does it mean when we are enlightened? It means that we have all of our illusions of the world have been destroyed. There's a meme going around about how everyone wants to be the butterfly, but no one realizes that to become a butterfly, the caterpillar has to go into a cocoon and turn into a big mushy ball of something that is neither cocoon nor butterfly in order to become that. And it may feel like this destruction of our illusions, it may feel like we are in the cocoon, that everything is messy. And this is why we're told what to pick up. This is why we're told what to grasp, what can we grasp onto when all of our illusions have been shattered. Only Govindam, only God, only that thing that is eternal. And how do we do it? And we're going to talk about that soon. So, yeah, we have a share in the chat. Devi Priya says, this highlights how I can get attached to the rules I add to my sadhanas and my tapas. I often notice that I get overly attached to doing it right, but then I get completely distracted by that attachment, and then I lose connection to the intention behind these practices. Yeah, yeah. And this whole, this verse really gets to the heart of that both end situation that we're going to see in later verses. Um, in later verses, we see that all of these practices, going to the Ganga, observing fast, giving charitably, you're meant to be comfortable, but give more. That these are all important practices to purify the ego and to release our worldly attachments. And they are practices. They do help us shift us from trying to kind of swallow the world whole to satisfy that unquenchable thirst for more, more, more. But only if we do them with knowledge, right? So understand why, and then observe and discern. So more of these ego impulses and desires, and see the way that these acts may ping your resistance or even your pride, right? I'm doing it really right. I did all my, or even I didn't do it right once, I give up. Or even I'm going to do this and then I don't. And then I feel like I've let myself down or my teacher down or, whatever these impulses are that start to be revealed even in these practices, pay attention. Pay attention. This is how we start to really hone in on what we were talking about earlier, those subtler and subtler effects and those subtler and subtler resistances. So a good question is, does it move you closer to Govindam or farther away? Closer to identification with the world or closer to identifying with your still and inner witness? Yeah, yeah. Some more shares reflecting, yeah, how I think we've all experienced that. Someone shared obsessing whether you're doing it right the whole time that you're doing it. Yes, this is that mind chatter, right? That goes on of, um, yeah, I think has everyone experienced that? Yes, lots of nodding heads. Yeah, am I doing it right? Oh, what about this? And then I remembered that, and then I remember that. Yeah, yeah. These are places to places to pay attention, places to wake up, places to make a practice of interjecting because we become aware of that strange world, because we become aware that our mind is doing something. Yeah. Yeah. And more shares. Yeah. All right. So we're doing these things is fine, but without understanding of the self, without this knowledge, this ultimate knowledge, nothing's going to give you mukti. So it keeps us on this path, right? We want to, this whole thing is seeking ultimate truth. Are we picking this up as a practice? Are we picking this up as a way of being? And this is giving us a reason, right? This is why you want to do it, because all the actions aren't going to get us there without seeking this ultimate truth. But don't worry, we have some things that will help. Verse 20. Let a man read but a little from the Bhagavad Gita, drink just a drop of water from the Ganges, worship but once Murari. He then will have no altercation with Yama. So it's helpful, right? With devotion and the knowledge of self, it doesn't actually take a huge penance. It just takes this jnanam and it takes devotion. So it takes knowledge and bhakti, right? So Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, these two paths of connection and these two paths of union. So with knowledge and devotion, those two together, you don't have to do, a million of anything, right? It could just take, a little bit of conscious awareness with devotion. That's why it's said elsewhere that even one verse of the Bhagavad Gita, when it's understood completely and lived fully, can bring enlightenment. And so this verse 20, reminds us again that it's not about those outward ego and the mind projections of perfect piety, right? It's about that commitment to Tattva Jnanam that's going to lead us to self-realization. And again, so this is what's going to lead us there. It's not self-realization itself, but that knowledge of the self is going to lead. It's going to give us that direction and that goal. Otherwise, we're just floating endlessly, lifetime after lifetime, in this ocean of samsara, right? For if you didn't know, Murari is another word for Govindam, is Brahman, is Atman. All right, so that says to have no altercations with Yama. So Yama is the Lord of death, right? It's that principle of death of the body, which is kind of the ruling principle of this loka or this dimension. This is called the loka of death. And and the reason it's called that is because we have these bodies, we go from lifetime to lifetime. Something is continuing through all of these lifetimes, but it's not the body. So many of us, one of the main distractions in this world is our fear of death. And so this is saying, if you just do a little bit of that, and you really are connecting with the truth of the self, then you're not going to have any altercations with death. Doesn't mean our bodies don't die, but it means that with devotion and the knowledge of self, you don't have to fear or avoid the death of the body, right? When we understand, there's verses in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna shares that or teaches that shedding our physical life to the self, to that part of us that is permanent, is like taking off a cloak. It's like shedding clothes off the body. That's what it's like to shed a life for the self. It might even feel good, right? Might even be wonderful and freeing. Um, but it's just we pick it up from lifetime to lifetime, these bodies. And the good news is that we also carry even this honed quality that we're doing now, this honed quality of seeking the ultimate truth, that comes with us too, right? So from lifetime to lifetime, this work that we're doing right now to know, to understand, to do this discernment, to do this detachment, it's sticking with us. It will come with us. We have been exposed. We have been inoculated. We are going to carry that. So the more that we connect with that devotion and the more that we turn towards Govindam in this lifetime, we are assured that we will continue to seek that ultimate truth in the next. So this is why we don't have to have fear of Yama. We don't have to have an altercation with Yama. We can move freely into more and more awareness of self. Yeah, wonderful. So, how does this make everyone feel? Do you feel a little more, does anyone feel a little more like they can take a breath in this samsara, knowing that if they follow this path, if they really keep honing back, you don't have to have an altercation with Yama. You don't have to fear death so much. Has anyone noticed over the course of your study of Bhaja Govindam, did anyone come into this study with a lot of fear of the death of the body? And has that been kind of relieved a bit? You can share in the chat and we'll keep going, but we'll come back to it in case. There's no right or wrong. I'm just wondering if you're already experiencing some of that. Yeah, we do have one share already. The fear I sit with is more of the process of decay. Yes. Yes, I think most of us realize we can't actually control, every one of us our bodies will die, right? Every single thing on this planet eventually will change, will alter, will die. But decay is that process of watching it happen. And that, while being the eternally blemishless, youthful self and watching it happen. So I think that probably occurs to many of us. And we can rest assured this is also where that has anyone witnessed someone very aged be ready for death? I have. And to them, they're already aware. They're already aware that it will be a relief. Now, that relief may come because the body itself is painful, is uncomfortable, is not working so well. But if we are aware of the truth of the self, that relief can be from something else. That relief can be because we see the thing fully. And so that is important. Yeah. Someone else shared, Sachara shared, definitely this whole text has created space for her to breathe a little more easily. I experience viscerally the anxiety I constantly feel, that it relaxes and there's an inclination to let go and trust Govindam. Trust, trust, trust. Trust is, I think I share that with you, Sachara, that trust or Shraddha is Shraddha or faith um, in that permanence is the core of how I will know ultimately. when I fully surrender and trust to that path is when I personally I know that I will fully have surrendered to the truth of the self. And many times I have these moments of trust and then fear and trust and fear and trust and fear. And this is where having, as Shinji says, this functional Shraddha. So we can have, if we can't yet have an ultimate trust in the truth of Brahman, in that we are ultimately Brahman Atman, then we start with our functional trust of Guru and the Veda Vakya or Shastra Vakya, like the truth of the Vedas, the truth of the teachings, the word and the truth of the teachings and the truth of the teacher. So we can have that functional trust and see, and then we use that in the laboratory of seeing and working with our mind because this is another kind of attachment. It's our attachment to running back to our fear. It's our attachment to believing that this world that we see around us is permanent when it is not. When everything we see and know, we know it's not permanent. So could we take that next leap? And that next leap is the big leap, which is why having the knowledge, having the intellectual knowledge is not mukti itself, but keep on that path of seeking that ultimate truth again and again. Yeah. Yeah. So another shares around death. The a student recalls Acharya Shunya's teaching about when she was in a car accident and she found herself connecting with Govindam. That was her first impulse, and I think that was enlightening because it shows us how with continuity and commitment and familiarity and belief and trust, we can be in that, even when things are happening around us that are catastrophic. The student shares that she tried that when she had a hard flight and she felt so much calm. I would say before this class, I did have more fear of death, and now I feel more at peace. I think the practice of what is not permanent everywhere has helped. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Uh, and another share. Bhagavad Gita definitely made me step up my game in terms of connection to Brahman, but now I have anxiety there. I won't be thinking about Govindam at the moment of my death, and I'll have to come back again. Like the monk in the story who was thinking about his fellow monk at his death, right? There's a story of that Acharya Shunya shared about the monk that was worried. He cared for his friend and he was worried about his friend at the moment of death. So he had to come back. Even though he had knowledge of the self, he came back because he was his last moments. And again, we go back to the first verses where we're told in Bhaja Govindam that um, we're told in Bhaja Govindam that what is important and why we're doing all of these things, why we're letting things go, why we're picking things up, while we're on a path, while we are in satsanga, why we find a teacher, all of these things are to ensure that at the moment of death, that at that moment with Yama, that our final thoughts of our mind are of this higher truth, and that will determine the course of the next life. And in this story that Acharya Shunya shared, I want to perhaps ease your mind that in that story, to be thinking of another at the final moment of your death is not the worst way to enter your next life. If one has to, then being in a compassion, that being an avatar of compassion as your next life is not the worst thing to be doing. Um, it's not perhaps our final mukti, it's not our final enlightenment, but there's many places in between, many lifetimes in between where most of our minds are engaged in every day and even to be in compassion for another. And so if you can focus your mind, if you can orient your mind towards this path of Shreyas and away from Preyas, then you will be engaging in the next life in such a fine and wonderful place that I feel sure that you will have continue on this journey. Remember, the promise is that we get to this mind goes from lifetime to lifetime. The mind carries through. And so our samskaras or our habituated pathways and grooves in the mind of where we tend to fall into, right? So if we tend to fall into a state of resentment and we carry that on, our next life will reflect that. However, if we tend to fall into a state of compassion, our next lifetime will reflect that too. So every moment in this lifetime, you get to change you get to develop new pathways and develop new habits of the mind. This is why so many of these practices are important. And Upasana yoga, or the practices of, and even why it's important to, as we'll see in the next couple of verses, why it's important that we do things to keep changing that mind state, right? Yeah. And understand that anxiety itself is the mind coloring an experience and creating also can be an act of resistance against change, right? And if you can look at that anxiety and that fear as, um, you know, again, this is a great way. Look at it, right? It's been brought, you see it now. You see the funhouse mirror. Oh, now my mind is just thinking like, what if I do it wrong? Again, what if I'm not thinking of Govindam at this stage of life? And there you go. Boom. Now we're tracked back onto this other pathway of fear and resistance. And so gently guide that mind back, gently guide those thoughts back. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Wonderful. Um, and yes, David shares that Bhaja Govindam has been a relief to hear. It's been a confirmation of other teachings that he has experienced. Yeah. All right. So what's our next verse? Is verse 22. We touched on this verse. The verse is, there's no shortage of clothing for a monk, so long as there are rags cast on the road. Free from vices and virtues, onward he wanders. One who lives in communion with God enjoys bliss, pure and uncontaminated, like a child and as intoxicated. Wonderful. So we touched on this verse in the last class in the context of Vairagyam, or detachment. But here we can look to that latter part of the verse. So when we're free from vices and virtues, which is to be free of our worldly attachments, so that while actions are still performed, they are done so without attachment to the outcomes of those actions. This is how we become free. So free to pursue that ultimate truth. We're not free from action. This embodied existence required action, right? Here, the monk is still wandering. He's wandering. There is a pursuit, but he's in communion with God. He's not miserable. He's in bliss. He's not trapped in that mindless pursuit of the same things. Yeah. So there's always something to meet our needs. Again, remembering that this world has enough to meet everyone's needs, but not enough to meet the greed or the unchecked trishna of even one man's desires. So as long as there are rags cast off on the road, um, yeah, and right now we have entire deserts full of cast off rags, of cast off clothing. There's so much. But as long as that, when we're freed from vices and virtues, when we're freed from again, we're not being freed from the actions, we're being freed from our attachments to the outcome of those actions. We still do things. We still wander. We still go to satsang. We still pursue our spiritual growth. We still chop wood and carry water, right? But we do it in a state of bliss, a state of true bliss. You're not miserable doing those things. We're not attached or resentful of doing those things. We're doing the things pure and uncontaminated like a child. And if you've ever seen a child take joy in helping, let me help it, let me help, mom or dad. I'm helping. Like that joy of doing the same thing, this is it's an intoxicating joy because it's without that coloration, right? It's just everything when we're connected to source is more source. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to quickly move through some of these next verses because we just went through some of them, but we're just going to look at them through this lens of seeking ultimate truth. So, verse 23, who are you? Who am I? From where do I come? Who is my mother? Who is my father? Ponder thus, look at everything as essence-less, and give up the world as an idle dream. All right. So in the past, we've talked about this in the context of relationships. And I don't know, who am I? Where am I coming from? Who do I belong to? These are all ways of creating sort of an identity within samsara. But today we're looking at it as, the second part of it, to ponder thus, looking at everything as essence-less. So everything is impermanent. Everything we see around us as impermanent, even those identifiers, those titles, and those titles of relationships and those roles. So it's directions. This is kind of a verse for us on directions for how to pursue that ultimate truth. Just look around you at everything as impermanent. Let it all go. Let go of all these habituated drives and identifications. Just let them go. And then remember the strangeness of the dream. Remember the strangeness of this world again and again. Like, why are we even like, what does it mean to belong to someone? What is it like? What does that mean? Do we belong to anyone? Do we belong even to our children? Do we belong, like, who do we belong to in this world? If, we're all Atman, like, how could we, like, there's that possession isn't necessary. So we can remember the strangeness of the dreams. Just start remembering. This is a weird way to identify. This is a weird way to be. What are we doing here? This is how we wake up. Wait, I'm not any of these things. Wake up. This is weird. First, we just like, okay, we acknowledge, like, how many lifetimes have we come through? And was this person that we call mother, was that our mother in every lifetime? Probably not. Were we, we are different even in this lifetime in context of our relationships. We've been a child, we've been a parent, we've been an aunt, we've been an uncle, we've been all these things. And even in this lifetime, it's changed. So chances are even those relationships are temporary. And so do we have to be so identified with them? Or can we see that it's kind of weird to lock ourselves into these things? And this is maybe a trigger for that. Wait, this is strange. Hold on. I think I'm in a dream. I think I'm in a dream. All right. Um, verse 26, I'm not even really going to go into today, but it's more in this essence. It says, give up lust, anger, infatuation, and greed. Ponder over your real nature. So it's more again, like, how do we seek the ultimate truth? We keep pondering over our real nature. Ponder over what is real, what is impermanent. And fools, remember this whole text started off, oh, fool, it's speaking to the old man who was not unintelligent. He was not stupid. He wasn't a fool because he was dumb. He was a fool are they who are blind to the self. So when we are ignorant of what is real, then we follow foolish pursuits, right? Like the grammarian in the beginning, we follow things that appear important, but ultimately aren't getting us closer to God. And so we can look to this as a quick guidance of like, wait, just keep going. This is again, keep pursuing the knowledge of the self. And if not, if you're blind to the self, you are cast into hell. And this doesn't mean an external hell, it means samsara, right? We suffer endlessly. We suffer endlessly in samsara, and that means lifetime after lifetime. So it does not take much to cast us into hell in this reality. And the hell that is described in various religions doesn't hold a candle, doesn't hold even a bit of when compared to the hell of our inner shut off monologue, right? Our inner self disconnected from God. When we feel lonely, when we feel isolated, when we feel afraid, when we feel like there is nothing but this samsara, that is hell, right? Yeah. So this is saying again, come to the heart, come to the heart, that bhava, that feeling connection. When you are disconnected from this truth, you are in hell. When you are connected to this truth, you have unending bliss. Who wants to experience the unending bliss? Yay! Yes, of course, of course. And everything we do without this knowledge is just a constant seeking for temporary bliss, right? And it's frustrating because it doesn't last. So let's turn towards a truth that leads us ever towards that ultimate truth. And then verse 27. We're cranking through these, but I, even though there's a lot of verses that we're talking about today, I want to just put this all in the context of this. This is the pathway. We're being shown, we're being shown how to seek the ultimate truth. We're being shown what is the direction. We talked about orienting ourselves earlier, someone shared. And orienting ourselves in what direction are we going? Are we going towards Govindam? So, how do we get there? Verse 27 says, regularly recite from the Gita, meditate on Vishnu in your heart, and chant his thousand glories. Vishnu is also, Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu and Govindam as well. And so take delight to be with the noble and the holy. Enjoy being in satsang. Enjoy being with Guru. Enjoy being in communities of knowledge and distribute your wealth in charity to the poor and needy. Enjoy that as well without attachment. This doesn't mean becoming, an aesthetic. And remember, we are in our tradition, we are a grihastha lineage, and we are a householder lineage, and the to let it's not wrong to have, and then but it can be right to share and take joy into that too. Not with not from that false piety that we talked about earlier. So we come back. So see here, we just came back to the actions from verse 17, but now we have them with Tattva Jnanam, right? Now we have them with the knowledge of self. So we're still doing those same actions, all of these actions, right? Then, once we have that ultimate truth, once we're in that process of seeking ultimate truth, then these same actions, then they have power, right? Then they become an effective path of seeking the ultimate truth. They're not just led by ego. They're not just led by the mind trying to negotiate and trying to buy our way past actually changing, and instead they're done with, with delight, right? It says with delight, and we're distributing our wealth and charity. We're not buying something. We're giving fully from that knowledge of self. And then that's the knowledge of what's real and unreal and what's permanent and impermanent. And then all these karmas, all these actions, then they actually become a source of support for us, to purify our ego, right? And so that we have, it becomes a tool to come to know the self and to keep hammering at those delusions, and then to reveal Govindam in our own heart. And then we see it all around us, right? This is bhakti. This is devotion. It's not only to our image of God. It's to seeing that truth in everyone around us. Instead of seeing the illusion, we see the reality. Let's take a pause here. How does that land for you? We talked about where, and several of you shared before, how you've experienced sometimes doing the actions, but with that sort of attachment, or the mind, or maybe the ego gets involved in the sense of me and mine, but more often it's probably the restless thinking, that mind thought of catching on things. And then we can become rote in our practices. And if we keep focusing on seeking ultimate truth, even during those practices, we'll keep being connected more and more to that truth. Does anybody want to share their experience of that? Have you found that you are more able to now practice without attachment to outcome, and you are starting to, or consistently seeing Govindam around you, in yourself, and in your engagements with others? Deborah, would you like to share?
I have to say that this has been so incredibly helpful to me because I've been taking the necessary actions, and I need to, but surrendering to the outcome. Whether I get the car back, I don't get the car back, just surrendering over and over and over again. And being in this class today and feeling that connection that I experience when I'm here in class to self, to community, to unity, it's just definitely just it's like the anchor. Just surrender, surrender, surrender. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, over
Heard
and
our
over again.
digital.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Deborah. I have been contemplating that surrender as well, in my own life, and clarifying a few things about what am I surrendering to. And and I realized in a recent sort of medical environment that the surrender is to Ishvara. The surrender is to Govindam. The surrender is not to samsara. And so I've been playing with that, of like, when we need to surrender, and we do, in order to, like, we're surrendering. What are we surrendering? We're surrendering our, let me lay my expectations at the feet of Ma. Let me lay my fears, in the lap of Govindam. And let me allow what is needs to happen. But I don't need to surrender to another's ego. I don't need to surrender to injustice, but I want to surrender to Ishvara in this process. And that was that that's that's a it was tricky. It is tricky for my mind. Yeah. Kayla, would you like to share?
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like the thing I've been studying since last summer and then just in a course with Acharya Shunya and then just a couple months in the Vedic study circle. And I think the thing that comes up for me a lot is just um, accepting that there could be that kind of closeness and intimacy. I think like grief led me to this. And so like opening my heart to be like, I don't actually have to be totally alone.
Mm.
Um, and that like, yeah, that like there is a consciousness that could be with me is like so it's such a big leap to like be like, okay, I'm gonna let go of that feeling like I'm totally alone, which of course came from the experience with the parents I was born to live with. So it's like this whole, it's just such a big leap. And it's so nice to be in a community of people who are doing that. And just kind of because there's not how much messages there out there in the world that this is even possible. There's such blaring noise that you are alone and that you suffer alone, and that maybe your love of your life will solve that, or like a remote Jesus, but like whatever. Like, um, so that intimacy is really the big like almost like opening my heart to a love, to opening my heart to a love affair or just like loving a pet, just like can I really risk a love like this and like trust that that's possible.
Beautiful. Um, Kayla, that is the core. That right there is the core of what is happening on this planet right now. You are experiencing exact that isolation and loneliness and separation is the core of everything that is it's the heart of samsara. It's the heart of the confusion and the illusion. And to cross that bridge, to have faith and trust and hold out your hand and allow yourself the possibility of God, the possibility that you have never been alone, that you are that is out there, that is in here. There is a beautiful, if you haven't yet experienced Navratri with Acharya Shunya, I highly recommend this fall experiencing the Navratri teachings. And and also Acharya Shunya's Bhakti Yoga series that lasted about well over a year. Those are beautiful ways to kind of guide you in like how do you trust? How do you connect with God? How like not through ritual, which is great. It's great to have ritual, but through that, to allow your heart to to find solace and be still in God. And I find, the mother teachings, the Navratri teachings, the goddess teachings have been an incredibly powerful way for me to connect with that in my own life. And for many of the people here, I know I see a lot of people here in the audience that have been participating in those goddess teachings. And I remember Acharya Shunya sharing that if in this lifetime you did not have the mother that you wanted or needed, it doesn't mean that you weren't being mothered and that you can't find your mother in Ma. And so it's a great inroad into this feeling and building that trust. And um, yeah, I highly encourage it. And also just to give yourself moments of connection or moments of allowing, right? Doesn't have to be always permanent right now. Take off that pressure of like, just right now, I feel loved. Right now, I feel held. Right now, I feel connected. Right now, I'm not alone. Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Devi Priya, would you like to share?
Thank you, Jai Ma, Jai Gurudev. I'm always struck by how the teachings were offered overlap and connect. And so I'm feeling the Vedic review that we've been doing with Ishani for these months just here as well. And your question about how to be with, for me, to be with Sat, like when something happens now in my life, I just then ask myself, is this ultimate existence or is this samsara? It's this very simple question that I would think, my mind would think wouldn't shift, but it just shifts everything. It feels like I go up and everything is down here. And so it has been so helpful. So thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, just this is how we wake up from the dream. We keep remembering. And again, to bring it back to that reminder of the dream, like our dreams of our everyday sleeping dreams. There have been times, I'm sure, also where you've sort of woken up and then decided to go back in, right? And so like, oh no, and or fell deeper asleep outside of the dream, and yet you're still sleeping. And this is why reminder, right? What's your alarm clock? Like, what's your alarm clock in this dream? In this dream, it's these reminders, reminder, like, wait. And this is why we have practice. This is why we come to satsang. This is why we keep exploring different aspects of the teachings. This is why we sit with our teacher. This is why we crack open the books and our notes to just remember, because we're trying to conquer at least one lifetime and probably many lifetimes of habituation. So it is a simple question, but it has to be that intentional practice of having that question again and again. All right. I will, let's see. I think we have a few more shares. So before we get to those next shares, I want to put a pause on those. I know that I see that Zaina has a share and also the Jayanti wanted to share. So hold on. Let's get to this final verse and then I want to go into, and then I want to make time for everyone who has a share. All right. All right. So we've talked about this verse before. But let's go into it again, just in this context. So we taught regulate the pranas, life forces, remain unaffected by external influences, and discriminate between the real and the fleeting. Chant the holy name of God and silence the turbulent mind. Perform these with care, with extreme care. All right. So here are I just wanted to finish with this because, in terms of these verses, because here we see what are we learned about those external actions we could take. We could read the Gita. We can chant the name of God. We can give away our excess wealth. So these are all things that we can do in the world. And then here we see what are the internal actions we can also take to support the seeking. Like how do we stay on path? We've talked about reminders. So how do we keep seeking this ultimate truth? Because we forget. So how do we do it? We also have these internal actions. So and we want to purify. So the external actions are really good to purify our ego and what is our ego in this context? It's our sense of me and mine. This is my person, this is my thing, I should have gotten this. All of those actions help us to kind of like let that part calm down. And then these internal actions help to purify our mind and our senses, right? So the actual apparatus of how we're thinking can cloud us. The seeking of constant sense fulfillment can distract us from this path. And so when we regulate the pranas, the energy, the breath, vayu, and these internal energy centers, the art chakras, when we can regulate those, and we can do that with pranayama, with asana. There's many esoteric practices that we can do that with, but also some very simple ones to just follow the breath. When we breathe, feel that breath come into the body and feel that energy along with that breath enervate us. Feel our energy centers connect in with each one of those places within that are always connected with the divine. So this is a way, this is an internal action. It's also telling us upasana yoga practices are helpful. And so we can also cultivate viveka or discernment constantly to remain unaffected by external influences. So this means choosing the right company and the right input, right? What are we engaging with in the outside world that's distracting us or affecting us? What are these external influences? If we want to seek the ultimate truth, we need to change the way and the means and who we're engaging and what we're engaging with. That's why we choose satsanga, right? And it's why we rein our senses in and bring our awareness in. And then chanting the holy name of God through mantra and prayer and ritual. These that then will help us to silence the turbulent mind. And that's a practice of meditation or prayer or even being in satsang can help us to manage that mind that's going here and there and chiming in with how we're doing things wrong. And this will all help us to silence that turbulent mind. Much earlier, we were talking about the storm of desires, and those desires, they arise in this turbulent mind. So now we're learning how to manage that turbulent mind. And then finally, perform with extreme care. Not just care, but extreme care. What does that mean? I think to me that means don't be don't let it be casual. When we treat these things we casually, it's very easy to become mechanistic, mechanical with our things. And this is where all of a sudden we find ourselves, oh, I was doing it. I was seeking the ultimate truth, but now I'm just doing practices. I got to get it done until I get to go on to my work and I do this and that and other. So extreme care. What are we pursuing? Are we really pursuing ultimate truth? The mind is so tempted also to say, I know that, right? This is one of the traps of the mind that knows. Sometimes there's a vasana or a attached addiction and desire called Shastra Vasana. And in Shastra Vasana, we have an attachment to gaining more and more of the Shastra, more and more texts, more and more knowledge. We're just accumulating knowledge, information, but are we actually on a path of seeking the ultimate truth? Or are we just then feeding our intellect, feeding our intellectual desires? So, what happens when we know that? What happens when we get casual? What happens when we don't take care, extreme care, while we're doing these things? We shut down and then we forget. Yeah. Wonderful. So, I think we have a pathway. We know where we're headed and we know what to pick up, and we know to pick that up with extreme care. Beautiful. And we have a few more shares. Yes. Zaina, would you like to share?
Hello, hi, I'm Zaina. I never know how to start because I don't know all of the greetings. So I'm just gonna say hello. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, I was just like during the last sharing circle, or like the last group of people that were sharing, I was really just like really resonating with this kind of like crippling sense of like disconnect and loneliness that I think has been going on since COVID. Like being in grad school remotely, and then I'm a therapist, and everything turned remote when I was in school. And so it's like my life that used to feel really big and out in the world and have a lot of people. I'm also living in a new place after, having moved, and now everything is like online and away from, you know, the groups that I used to connect with. And it's taken a really big toll on like my spirit and my mental health and my heart. But I think what this space has really provided me with, like the satsang and also like the teachings and some of the rituals, especially like the bhakti yoga rituals, are this sense of like deep presence and love, and there's not a barrier for entry. I don't have to be cool or like popular enough to get invited, or like wondering, like, like that, with that sense that I'm usually looking for in a lot of my like other human relationships. I'm like, do I belong? Am I worthy? Like, how do they perceive me? Am I going to get invited, or will I not be? And it's just kind of just like this really abundant space of love and acceptance and support, that I think just is really rare to find in the material world. And so I think it's been kind of like a soothing balm on like a wound that I think, over the last like 7 years or so has kind of been really tender. And this space and the teachings of Acharya Shunya, yeah, have kind of just been like a medicine that's getting poured over it. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. I'm grateful.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I see in the chat a lot of belonging. Yeah, people are reflecting that they also feel that belonging in this community. And I think if you had a chance to explore some of the earlier teachings too, this is this is why Bhaja Govindam, this is why Adi Shankaracharya says, basically run, don't walk to satsang. Like hie thee to satsang. That's, and it's beautiful because it's not saying run, don't walk to go be isolated and separated from the world. It says run, go jump on the boat of satsang, right? And that's repeated a couple times. Find right community. Even this, that verse of taking, take delight to be with the noble and the holy, finding right community is important. It's important to this path to knowing the self. We see it reflected in, we see this journey reflected in right company. And every person here probably has found their own journey enlightened by questions that each other has asked of the teacher. That there are many times where people will ask a question of Acharya Shunya, and it opens up a way of thinking that I had not even realized for myself. And my whole experience was enlightened more. And I think that the beauty of, there's a beauty in the silent, quiet, isolated times as well. And this path encourages us to not stay isolated, that we can have some, we should isolate from the unholy and ignoble, or ignoble. Yeah, so we should separate from our attachments to things that are just so temporary and fleeting. And yet, it doesn't mean we have to be isolated and alone on the journey. And this is why it's beautiful to find the teachings, the teacher, and the community. This is key, Yeah. Guru, Sat, and Sangha. All of those are key, and it helps us because we have the experience of realizing we are not alone, even on this journey. We are not alone ultimately. But sometimes, as we talked about earlier, if we can't quite trust that, we can see that there's at least in right company, we can see other people experiencing similar things and other people working through them and other people sharing how they're reminding themselves of that ultimate truth. And that's so powerful. And I also am so grateful and glad to be a part of this community. And for those of you who are joining us online from afar on a recording, your presence is here as well. You are part of this community as well. And know that your questions and your shares are also helping all of us. So I think, unless Jayanti, did you have anything that you wanted to share before we end?
No, I'm good. I had a couple thoughts, but I'm taking them deeper.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great way too. Also, I think that is something we'll get into in future sanghas and how to ask questions in the traditional Vedic sense and how to take this. This whole companion study is a mananam, right? And I'm sharing mananam from going deeply in Bhaja Govindam, and you will also keep growing in that mananam and keep sharing, and your mananam builds and builds. So we all gain, and I'm wonderful. I'm really glad. I'm just going to look through the chat real quick. Yes, Marika shares that walking the path of remembering the circular learning is therefore that we mentioned earlier is so important and a perfect and a powerful method that Acharya Shunya is offering us, passing on this light of wisdom and offering a prayer in remembrance of Babaji and the lineage, who you'll see behind me. Wonderful. All right. Lots of feeling strengthened, grateful to be in community. You're welcome to everyone. And deep gratitude. Yes, a deep gratitude for everyone for your shares and your vulnerability and for your trusting in this process and being present, right? This is the biggest leap we can take is to just show up. Show up for yourself. Show up for your journey and your seeking. Keep seeking this ultimate truth. Wonderful.